Hello and welcome to Ticker Climate. My name's Holly Stearns. Great to have your company every single week. Now, on Ticker Climate, we tackle the climate crisis that is facing our planet and we examine what actions governments and corporations need to be taking at the moment. I'm joined by my lovely co-host, Scott Hamilton, every single week. Scott, lovely to see you.
Hello, Holly. Great to be here again.
Lovely to have your company. Now, I wanted to kickstart our conversation today by talking about something a little bit grim, I suppose. Climate change potentially we're seeing again over in Canada. They're actually experiencing severe mudslides, severe rainfall, severe floods at the moment. What's going on there?
Yeah, look, this is really troubling, Holly, that the one thing that we know that dangerous climate change means more extreme events. It means more bushfires, more droughts and extreme weather events. And Canada, British Columbia, is the latest to be hit really hard. And these floods, and which have caused these massive mudslides, have caused deaths and literally thousands of people being displaced. It is really terrible. And I think that the whole city of Vancouver was cut off as the mudslides went through the major highways. So lots of people in real trouble there. And again, it brings back home that message that climate change means more extreme weather events, which is why we've got to keep global warming as close to 1.5 degrees as possible.
Now just delve into that a little bit further. We just showed the footage on the screen there of those severe scenes that we're seeing. It's quite horrific there. Those are people's homes, those are people's livelihoods, right? What kind of money and what kind of effort goes into sort of recovering from something like that?
Yeah, look, again, the cost of these events, and it's not just the actual immediate cost of the immediate damage to buildings and lives and people dying, it's also the flow-on costs. So after you have these major events, whether it be an extreme flood or an extreme bushfire, there's a huge amount of recovery that's got to occur, both in terms of the economy, the communities, the environment. If we think about the Black Summer, which is now 2 years ago in Australia, we're still seeing the recovery still having to happen now. So that's 2 years down the track. So the cost is enormous. And we need to start to thinking about that when people talk about the cost of taking action. Well, the cost of not acting is really big too.
Now, Scott, I wanted to talk to you something a little bit lighter now. The world's first fully electric and self-steering container ship. We're going to show that footage on the screen as well. What's the deal here? Who's it owned by?
This is really cool, Holly. So this is Yara, and if you recall, we actually talked quite a bit about Yara, one of the biggest fertiliser companies in the world. And it's got a major plant here in Australia, in the Pilbara, that's actually, we talked about it, getting a green ammonia facility, which is an important part of fertiliser, used for fertiliser. Well, over in Norway, which is the head office of Yara, they've just launched this fully electric, self-steering container ship. So this is about 80 metres long, and it's going to go up and down the coast of Norway. About 14 kilometres is the direct distance that it has to go if it was over land. But it'll go around the coast and it will save about 1,000 tonnes of carbon dioxide every year. It's a terrific story and it's very exciting to see container ships going electric.
Absolutely. And do you think we'll see other big companies move in that direction now too?
I think we already are, and Volvo's been a big leader in this space with its electric trucks. And now we've got electric ships and electric planes coming on. Look, this is the way the world is going, and that's where Australia's got to really start to catch up, or we're going to continue to be left behind.
It's really good to sort of see these big companies step out, I guess, and lead the way in that space. World's oceans are under threat at the moment. I feel like we talk about this a lot, but it is quite sad. Scientists are now calling for tracking oxygen loss that causes dead zones. What's this all about?
Yeah, so as part of the global warming, the impact on the oceans, that one of the things that we're seeing is this increasing areas of the ocean that have got lack of oxygen, which of course is critical to life and fish. And so scientists are putting out an urgent call for much better monitoring and study of these pockets of the ocean which have got lack of oxygen, because they cause dead zones, and that has impacts on reefs, on fish stocks, and all those things. And it's really concerning because the ocean plays such a big role in keeping a healthy planet.
Absolutely. And I mean, when we talk about, I guess, the detriment on our oceans and everything, the oceans are actually key to our survival as humans. And I think that sometimes we might forget that.
Yes, I actually think that we do. We sort of all love to go and sit by the ocean on a nice sunny day, or go for a snorkel, or those sorts of things. But if we don't look after these particular, this important part of the planet, that actually is like the lungs of the planet, is the way I try to think about it, then we're going to lose areas like the Great Barrier Reef, which is another really important part of our Australian identity, as well as a really important ecosystem.
Definitely an iconic landmark, isn't it, to Australia's culture and history. Now let's talk about overfishing at the moment. There's a crisis in overfishing. What exactly is going on here? What's the solution? How do we stop this from happening?
Yeah, so this was over the last little while. Actually, Twiggy Forrest, Andrew Forrest, who we all know from being the mining billionaire, is also really keen on the impacts on marine life. He actually did a PhD in marine science at the University of Western Australia. And he's been involved in a recent study that's looking at how countries are lining up with overfishing, which is really because we've got the capabilities now, particularly with these huge trawlers and the ability to take billions of fish out of the oceans. And he wanted to say, well, how is Australia shaping up against the other countries? And we got a D. For not very good. I think that no one got above a C, but certainly Australia was still causing too much overfishing, and that's having impacts on all of our fish and our not just the economy, the ability to have fish for our Christmas lunches or whatever it might be, but also in terms of the environment, of course, and again, sort of trying to find Nemo's getting harder.
Well, I think this also stems back higher than this, doesn't it? We're sort of seeing the fishing industries, they make so much money off this. They're a very large industry at the moment, but they're not that ethical as well. And there have been documentaries on Netflix and things like that where have sort of highlighted the negative impacts of the fishing industry. And regardless of our planet, it's actually not very ethical at the things that they do. What's going to happen here? Who's going to stop them? Are they too big to stop?
Well, that's a really challenging question, and I think that I would like to see more happen in the sort of United Nations. We saw the Declaration on Deforestation. There has been a lot of work going in at that level of trying to create a fund to stop overfishing and look after our oceans, but we're nowhere near doing as much as we need to, and we really got to. I think, got to look for much more sustainable ways of having fish. And so the sort of thing, and to his credit, Twiggy Forrest is actually investing in aquaculture, both in Albany in Western Australia as well as Tasmania. And that's really trying to think about, well, how can we still have our fish and our crustaceans and our oysters, but how can we do that in a sustainable way, and think about where is this fish coming from, and is it really just a part of the overfishing and killing our oceans?
And there was a really good point that was highlighted during a documentary on this, where they're talking about the tuna companies and how they'll just put the sustainable tick on the packaging when they actually look deeper, it's not sustainable at all. And so they're sort of just putting this tick there to look good, but essentially when you dig a bit deeper underneath the surface, their practices weren't sustainable. It's really interesting, and we could keep talking about that for a while, but really good to keep an eye on that as well. Now, I wanted to talk to you lastly before we wrap things up about Australia's climate policy in general. A federal election is fast approaching, and I mean, it might seem like a while away to the everyday human, but in politics it is fast approaching, and politicians are having to start getting prepared now. What is going to happen here in regards to climate policy at the next federal election?
Yeah, look, so it's going to be a huge topic. We certainly know that. We certainly know where the current government, the Morrison government, is where it's pitching, I suppose, particularly when it comes to climate targets, that they've said they're not going to increase their weak targets, which are relatively weak to the rest of the developed world, of 26 to 28%. The real question, I think, Holly, is to watch what Labor's going to do. Now, we've got 2 weeks of Parliament left, and then we're expecting, or we're likely to see, Labor announce what its climate policy is going to be. what's going to be particularly its 2030 target. That's going to be the real telling part of the next little while. Now, I actually think that anything less than 45% by 2030, which is what the Business Council are pushing. So this is not the radical left green groups. This is the Business Council are saying at least 45% by 2030. I think that Labor has to go at least that far. The other thing which is really interesting and to keep an eye on over this next couple of months is electric vehicles, which we've talked a lot about. So the federal government has the power to regulate emissions, carbon emissions from vehicles. And currently we don't, which is a disgrace. Now the question is whether Labor's going to take to the election a commitment to actually regulate the amount of carbon emissions, which I think that they need to. If we want to see more electric vehicles here, the businesses are saying you need to regulate the emissions, otherwise we'll just become a dumping ground for all the worst cars rather than the cool electric cars.
Well, we know that the shift to electric is going to be a major focus. We know that the United States is already moving in that direction, so we will have to as well. Scott Hamilton, always great to have your company.
Great to be here, Holly, and we'll see you next week.